No statement. It just came out. Yeah.
Let's clarify this for viewers. There used to be 0 duties and levies on all books before.
All books is complicated. On books, let's put it that way.
Books.
Because there are some books that are magazines, some books that are brochures, that are not part of that agreement. Yes, there should be 0 duty on books.
On books.
Yes.
Now, this new policy introduces levies and
a levy and a duty, making it a 50% tariff
on scientific and
educational books, and school printed books, and similar articles.
What's your interpretation? What will the government classify as educational books? I guess strictly academic books?
No, the fact is that the government is not monolithic, is it? It's based on the man who is going to clear your books, who's going to look at the HS code you filled, and what comes out when your container is opened. If there's one word that says school on your book is automatically a school printed book. The fact is that the law is so, there was no. We want to try and put ourselves in the mind of who decided on this increase, and we hope that it was a clerical error, because it is so out of the way. It is so 60 years of precedence must count for something. Since 1950, worldwide, no import duty on books. The Philippines tried to put a 1% duty on scientific books in 2009. It caused a massive uproar. It reached a 1% increase. Nigeria just put a 50% increase on those things.
50%, that's massive. Robert, what's the direct implication of that?
Clearly, increased cost of doing business. You know, I mean, for importers or booksellers who bring in their, who import books, it's going to add to the cost. And that invariably, too, would impact the pricing for these items. And then you see, one way we already have issues to deal with in the business, in the industry, in the book selling, whether you are an importer or even a local producer or publisher. You know, you have the issue of piracy that has not been dealt with. And then you have government regulation. Importers there is requirement for SONCAP, Standards Organization of Nigeria Conformity Assessment Program. You know, the procedures involved in even obtaining that certification are so tedious and frustrating. For months, you would have your shipment out there that you cannot even bring in because you're required to provide test reports and all of that. And then you come now to introduce tariff, import duty on books. It will increase the cost, of doing this. And that really is frustrating, you know, because companies, I mean, involved in genuine business, they have overheads, they have staff members who have their means of livelihood working in those organizations. I don't know what message these people are trying to pass across. It will be useful for the appropriate government agency or authority to clarify what they mean by scientific and school printed books, brochures, leaflets, and similar articles. Because I dare say that even the agencies at the port representing government in implementing or enforcing this new tariff.
I call it all books.
Oh, yes, they can just bring in anything under that.
That's what is going on at the ports now.
Yeah, something close. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully, we'll work very hard to bring in government representatives to explain this. But let me read some of the tweets of Paul Wabuiko, who is a spokesperson for the Minister for Finance, Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala.
You can actually read it all. It's just 13 short tweets.
Let me read some of the things, because I mean, this on the surface makes a lot of sense. I think the objective of the government is to encourage local printing. The government wants to encourage the local printing industry, and I think that's let me read. He says, while we sympathize with the publishers who are unhappy about the negative implications of the higher charges on their businesses, the amendments are part of government's fiscal policy measures designed to encourage self-sufficiency in local industry. He then goes on to explain that the adjustments were based on recommendations by relevant stakeholders in different sectors of the economy after extensive consultations. Doesn't that make sense to you?
Where do we? Is one of the major book importers?
Will the decision not force publishers to go to the local printing press to print their books?
No, it will force publishers. No, it will force publishers out of. It will force publishers out of business. The world is becoming more specialized. Because we come from a society that started just a few decades ago. Publishers came in. Publishers had to set up printing presses. By the time SAP came in, once their printing presses died, publishers packed up and went away. Publishers rarely own printing presses. Random House doesn't have a printing press. Penguin doesn't have a printing press. Publishers design and make books and print the books.
Now, the point, the publishers go to the local printers?
Because the capacity isn't there.
With the local...
Yes, for the volumes needed and at the cost, the local printers are working at a massive disadvantage. And this is where it's very important because there's this defensiveness that comes with patriotism, where people think that, look at them, they want to just import books. That is not the problem. The problem is that books are a medium by which information is passed. This is altruistic. Apart from the fact that it's going to really mess up our business, it's also altruistic. The fact is that you cannot put duty on information. You have to get these things in. And this is really important because once the local publishers can't cope, you want to help the local publishers. You already understand that you cannot help them by putting a duty. Local printers. Yeah. So you see, I'm even making the same error that these people have made. You want to help the local printers. The point is that you cannot help them by putting a duty on books because you've already signed an international agreement saying that you can't do that. How do you help them? By positively helping them, by spending money on the industry, by giving out grants, by creating a fund that will match investments in the industry, by removing all duties on printing machines, on ink, by reviving the paper industry parallel to removing all duties on paper. Once the paper industry has now climbed up, then you do not put those duties back on paper, so they will go and get the local paper. But the fact that even then, it will be an option to use. Because the world has, just like the way we produce fuel, not just the way we produce crude oil, some countries produce printers. You cannot compete with their level of specialization.
Yeah.
And if you want to, you cannot destroy your publishing industry to try and save your printing industry.
Robert, do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree. I agree with him.
How do we help the local printers?
Well, I think the government can begin by even investing much of their own government printing, get the local printers to do the printing. I doubt that they do.
Printing
precisely, yeah, those locals. Okay? And then infrastructure. I mean, the way it affects the manufacturers and then those in other spheres of industry, it's the same. If you don't have power, I mean, you cannot just jump into introducing duty, really, on books. And for me, I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. An administration that launched an initiative about 4 years ago, bring back the book. This is it's contrary, really, to that initiative. If you now come back again to impose duty on educational materials, which is a source of knowledge. And we know what knowledge is, yes.
So you're saying, what I'm hearing you say, gentlemen, is rather than putting the duties and levies, why not improve the local printing climate, so to speak, so that they can be more internationally competitive? Thereby, publishers can go to either the local printers or go overseas and print, as the case may be, and then that makes a lot of sense. But the government seems to say it's doing it with the best of intentions.
Things are always done with the best of intentions.
Well, you said something that they consulted with relevant stakeholders. Yes. Now we have the Nigerian Publishers Association, we have the Booksellers Association. I doubt that they were consulted before this decision was arrived at or taken. Because
the NPA held an emergency meeting last week when this thing came up, and they've written a letter. It's not a public letter, to the coordinating minister of the economy, appealing for there to be clarification and a review, because the consensus is that this was made in error. So that's just
the Florence Agreement.
Yes.
Now, why? I mean, maybe the answers are obvious, but let's talk about it. Why did the UNESCO, it's a UNESCO treaty,
yes,
correct?
Yes, it's a UNESCO treaty in 1950.
What's the importance of an agreement like that?
This was 5 years after a world war. Now, you had formed your UN, you wanted to also form a cultural body, so UNESCO was formed. And one of the first things they did, one of the first agreements they signed that they called people into was the UNESCO agreement on the importation of cultural, educational, and scientific materials, 1950. And why it was so important, because even in Article 1, if you read the reasons why, Because the reason why, and this sentence is very important, if I could just run through this sentence, it says that